Thanks for tuning in to the Jurassic Park cast, the Jurassic Park podcast where guests chat with me about Michael Crichton's 1990 novel Jurassic Park. And also not that too. A big shout out to Christoph Oakes of Snale, and a big thank you to him for letting me use his band's music to score this podcast. And you can find his music on Spotify and Bandcamp. And today's intro is from the song Sally Ride from Snale's second album Charlemagne. And the outro is Late Bloomer from Snale's debut album, Snale. Please hear out this clip from episode 67, The Encased Mosquito, where I continue my comparative review of the film Jurassic Park scene by scene and identifying which elements the script has borrowed from the novel. Here's the excerpt.
Okay, let's resume our analysis, or comparative analysis of the script and what was in the final product of Jurassic Park with the novel and see all the references that we can derive from the source text. Right, the scene begins with the anxious lawyer Donald Gennaro balancing his weight on a raft being pulled onto the land. He looks out of place. And the screen caption reads, Mano de Dios Amber Mine, Dominican Republic. There's a guy named Juanito, and he speaks in Spanish. It translates to, I bet 1,000 pesos that he falls. And then Donald says, Hola, Juanito. And Juanito says, Hola, buenvenido, which means, welcome here. And Gennaro says, what's to say here at the airport? Hammond's not even here? He sends his apologies. We're facing a $20 million lawsuit by the family of that worker, and you're telling me Hammond can't even be bothered to see me? He had to leave early. He wants to be with his daughter. She's getting a divorce. Well, I understand that, but we've been advised to deal with the situation now. He goes, the underwriters feel the accident has raised some very serious safety questions about the park. That makes the investors very, very anxious, and I had to promise to conduct a very thorough on-site inspection. Hammond just hates inspections. They slow everything down. Juanito, they'll pull the funding. That'll slow him down even more. And then somebody goes, hey, boss, we found another mosquito. And he says, are you sure? And he goes, yeah, I'm sure. Come on. So they go in there into this cave, and Juanito says, watch your head. And Gennaro says, if 2 experts sign off on the island, the insurance guys will back off. I already got Ian Malcolm, but they think he's too trendy. They want Alan Grant. Grant? You'll never get him out of Montana. And he says, more light, show me something over here. Guys, give me some light. And Gennaro says, why not? While he's examining this amber, he goes, because Grant's like me. He's a digger. And then he says something like, you're a pretty one, or he says something like that to the mosquito and the amber. So in the first draft of this scene, it is astonishingly similar. I don't know really what's different here. Oh, there's a couple more details. So Donald Gennaro, here we get some description. He's 40, in a city man's idea of hiking clothes and a $100 haircut. And he approaches on a raft being pulled across the river by 2 men. That's a little different. And this we get a name for Juanito. On the hillside, Juan Rostagno. Rostagno. He's a 30-ish Costa Rican, a smart-looking guy in worker's clothes, and he's waiting for him. And then he's got 1,000 pesos, says he falls in. Gennaro finally lands, and Rostagno helps him off the raft, and he goes, hola, Juanito. The dialogue is almost all the same. But I'll give you some of the directions here. Rostagno leads Gennaro toward the mine. Dozens of shirtless workers claw and scrape at the rocky mountainside that is the site of an extensive mining operation. The work is all done by hand, pick and shovel, instead of by dynamite and bulldozer. And then when they're having a chat here, it says a worker hurries up to them and bursts into the conversation, and he's breathless, so he's pretty excited. He says, Chief, we found another mosquito in the same place, Jeffy. And he says, are you sure? Show me. And so they scramble back deeper into the mine. Rostagno calls back over his shoulder to Gennaro. Seems like it's going to be a good day after all. They found another one. Come on. So they walk into this cave. It's dark, dripping cave where there's at least a dozen other workers, and they're all gathered in a tight circle staring at something intently. Rostagno fights his way to the center of the group, and one of the workers hands him something, and Rostagno examines it carefully. It's a chunk of amber, a shiny yellow rock about the size of a $50. And he returns and holds the amber up to the sunlight streaming through the mouth of the cave. With the light pouring through it, the amber is translucent, and we can see something inside the strange stone. A huge mosquito, long dead, entombed there. You're so beautiful. You'll make a lot of people happy, he says in Spanish. And that's it. As far as I know, Malia Scotch Marmo, her script doesn't address this section at all. These were all inventions of David Koepp. And so it skips right to Ellie and Grant working in the Badlands, which we'll cover in another episode. That's got nothing to do with us here and now. So let's review some of this. Juanito Rostagno. We don't get the name Rostagno mentioned out loud, but here's what I found about Rostagno. And should derive from the medieval name Rostagnus, according to heraldryinstitute.com. The name most likely derives from the French Rosten or Rostaine, as is also possible a direct derivation from the Germanic name Hrostein, from which the same French name is derived, consisting of the terms Hrod, H-R-O-D, which means Gloria, and Stein, which means stone, with the meaning of stone of glory. So, this name may mean stone of glory, and Juanito says, Grant is like me. He's a digger. What are they digging for? Precious rocks. Juanito mining for amber, Grant excavating for fossils. So screenwriter David Koepp couldn't possibly have stumbled across this by accident, right? He picked this name for its meaning, even though it never made it into the final product, which I think is fascinating. And Juanito is a Spanish and Hebrew name meaning, with the same etymological roots as John and Johann, things like that. It just means God is gracious. So Juanito Rostagno is looking for glorious stones by the grace of God. And if you were wondering, Gennaro, sort of an Italian word for January or Janus, where Janus is the Roman god of beginnings and transitions, hence where the word January comes from, at the beginning of the calendar year. Gennaro is also written as a fashionable dresser by Crichton, and perhaps an Italian name lends itself to Italian fashion. He meets Grant and Sattler wearing an Armani suit, which is coded as meaning, an expensive suit on page 63. Donald is sort of Scottish or Gaelic or Celtic or something like that for ruler or a great chief. But do I think that his name is meant to evoke a fashionable ruler who's rich, evoking the beginning of a new age? Not really, no. But I guess that's kind of what the name means. So the inspections. This scene introduces the need for a safety inspection, and that there is a lawsuit. This isn't quite what's being said in the novel. On page 49, Gennaro says, we can't trust Hammond anymore. He's under too much pressure. The EPA is investigating him. He's behind schedule on his Costa Rican resort, and the investors are getting nervous. There have been too many rumors of problems down there. Too many workmen have died. And now this business about a living procomsit whatever on the mainland. We're told on page 49. So there are multiple reasons, but none are said to be lawsuits. That said, nervous investors is faithful to the text. I can see why Koepp would simplify this, though. Multiple causes for concern is too busy for a quick moment of exposition, whereas a $20 million lawsuit by the family of that worker, presumably the one we just watched get eaten by a raptor, that's very simple. Further, the film strongly implies that this safety inspection will make or break Hammond, and the novel implies this too. Recall, Gennaro was firmly instructed by his boss, Daniel Ross, quote, let's be very clear about one thing. I don't know how bad that situation is, Donald, but if there's a problem on that island, burn it to the ground, we're told on page 58. And he adds, screw Hammond. But this is just the first inspection. Quote, we can't screw around with this. We've got to inspect that island right away. I've asked Hammond to arrange independent site inspections every week for the next 3 weeks, Gennaro says. Gennaro was going to be very thorough with this, and he had explicit instructions to not flinch if it came to pulling the plug. Frankly, Hammond was probably doomed before anybody arrived on the island. They were going to pull the plug on this no matter what, really. Hammond's provenance, where is he? Now, Gennaro says, we're facing a $20 million lawsuit by the family of that worker, and you're telling me Hammond can't be bothered to see me? This suggests that Hammond was down here in the Dominican Republic's amber mines? Well, but you just missed him. He just darted off to be with his daughter. Why would Hammond be in the Dominican Republic? It's no closer to Costa Rica than Boston is to Nashville. It doesn't make any sense that he would have been there. Also, Hammond isn't off visiting his daughter. We know this. Hammond darts off to Montana to bribe Grant and Sattler into joining the inspection instead. That's the next thing we see in this movie. So that he's off with his daughter is balderdash. But again, this is a fast-moving moment of exposition, so bringing up that his daughter is getting a divorce is fine. We, I guess, kind of need to know that, I guess. And that said, this is faithful to the novel. The kids' parents are getting a divorce, and it seems to be an excuse for Hammond to bring the kids to Jurassic Park. Hammond says on page 92, quote, their parents are getting a divorce. I want them to have a fun weekend here. And Timmy says his father has already moved out on page 95 and adds, he moved out last month. So that would have been like July 1989. On page 34, we're told this. And that his mom has a new bald boyfriend she knows from work who's younger than his dad. He's getting the scoop on that. Now, I have a pet theory on Lex and Tim and their arrival to Jurassic Park. There's really nothing in the text that confirms this, but the clues are there that makes this something that I believe in. So the Procom Signathus remains identified by Dr. Marty Gutierrez are shipped to New York City, and Gennaro has arranged to have those remains flown to Jurassic Park. I believe that Tim and Lex live with their mom in New York City. I believe this because Tim is visiting the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. Lex wears a New York Mets baseball cap. Mr. Murphy is a Mets fan, we're told over and over. And in the chapter Plans, one of the architects who designed the Isla Nublar Resort are from Dunning, Murphy and Associates, who are located in New York. Murphy is their name. These guys are from New York. They're from New York, although it's not specifically said. And finally, on page 73 in the chapter, Malcolm says, I always maintained that this island would be unworkable. I predicted it from the beginning. He reached into a soft leather briefcase, and I trust by now we all know that the eventual outcome is going to be, you're going to have to shut the thing down. Shut it down, Hammond stood angrily. This is ridiculous. Then Hammond storms off to make a call. I have some phone calls to make, Hammond said, and he went into an adjoining cabin. I think this is when Hammond comes up with the scheme to have the grandkids put on the plane from New York that's already booked to transport the Compy remains to Jurassic Park. Recall, the Procomsignathus remains are intended to be shipped to Jurassic Park from New York, where Alice Levin discovered the specimen. Quote, well, I wonder if you could give me the details on that, Gennaro said. Quote, then I can run down that specimen for Mr. Hammond, who's very excited about it. I'm sure you want to see the actual specimen, too. Perhaps I can even get it delivered to the island while you're all down there, Gennaro said on page 51. And after they've arrived on the island, when Gennaro hears the helicopter arriving, he says, excuse me, but I think I hear the helicopter. That's probably the sample for Dr. Grant to look at. And he started out of the room, and they all followed on page 91. This flight from New York could have brought Lex, Tim, and the specimen. Although after Lex and Tim arrive, the specimen is forgotten. I'd like to think that the specimen that they were arranging to have delivered from New York was accompanied by Tim and Lex, and that Hammond schemed it up as Malcolm was jeopardizing his safety inspection and his plans for the future. So I just think that all fits. And Hammond admits on page 383 he should never have brought the kids. They'd been nothing but trouble from the beginning. Nobody wanted them around. Hammond had only brought them because he thought it would stop Gennaro from destroying the resort, but Gennaro was going to do it anyway. So, the only argument I have to make here is that Hammond is upset that Malcolm is so matter-of-factly rejecting Jurassic Park. That he's going to deny that it's safe without ever stepping foot on the island, without inspecting a single thing. He's so prejudiced against the idea that he'll never endorse the park. This worries Hammond, and he immediately resorts to a backup plan. Get these kids here. Maybe they can have the time of their life and Gennaro won't destroy the resort. All the pieces fit together very nicely. It's just odd that there isn't any more textual connective tissues for something that I imagine Crichton so clearly thought out, but he didn't spell out. Anyhow, so that's just a pet theory of mine. Anyhow, back to our review. The site experts on page 50 were told who the site experts will be. Quote, I'm starting with the experts Hammond already hired as consultants early in the project. Gennaro tossed a list onto Ross's desk. First group is a paleontologist, a paleobotanist, and a mathematician. They go down this weekend and I'll go with them. Would they tell you the truth? Ross said. I think so. None of them had much to do with the island, and one of them, the mathematician Ian Malcolm, he was openly hostile to the project from the start. Insisted it would never work, could never work. And who else? Just a technical person, some computer systems analyst. Review the park's computers and fix some bugs. He should be there by Friday morning. That technical person is Dennis Nedry, but really, at no point does he appear to be one of the site experts that's charged with reviewing the safety of the island. This doesn't fit. Like Nedry is part of the inspection? I get that he's visiting the site at the same time, but it's tremendously incongruous with the plot that he's there as a site expert. He's on the job. He's working for Hammond. He's working out bugs. He's not there reviewing things for Gennaro's law firm. All right. Gennaro. In one script, Gennaro is introduced as Donald Gennaro, 40, in a city man's idea of hiking clothes and a $100 haircut. He approaches on a raft being pulled across a river by two men. But in the novel, Gennaro was a stocky, muscular man in his mid-30s, wearing an Armani suit and wire-frame glasses, and his secretary packed him, quote, running shoes your size, and khaki shorts and shirts, and a shaving kit, a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt if it gets cold. So Gennaro wasn't to be, dressed especially posh at the park. Ultimately, the actor, Martin Ferrero, he doesn't show up with a $100 haircut. I mean, his hair doesn't look like he gets paid, that he pays that much for a trim. A $100 haircut means he should look like he's coming straight from the red carpet, right? Or from a grand opening or something. The suit is nice, but it's not power colors, which is like dark blue. It's a fairly common tan brown. He doesn't look, out of place as perhaps it was intended to be written by the script here. And in terms of him being 40-something, or 40 or 30-something, Martin Ferrero was like 47 when the film was made, so that's fine, whatever. Finally, the script and the film posit that Grant is very content working in the Badlands, and it would be a challenge to compel him away from his work. Hammond was able to convince Grant over the telephone. On page 48, I'd like you to look at the island for me. Give me your opinion. I'll be paying you the usual weekend consultant rate of $20,000 a day. That'd be $60,000 for 3 days, and if you can spare Dr. Sattler, she'll go at the same rate. We need a botanist. What do you say? Elliot looked at Grant as he said, well, Mr. Hammond, that much money would fully finance our expeditions for the next 2 summers. I guess we can, they say. So the cache spoke to them. That's all there was to it. Hammond on that call was actually distracted by the Proconsignathus remains. So, like, he didn't really have to twist their arm. He didn't even give it his full attention. So they were purchased pretty quick for heroes.
All right, a big thank you to you for tuning in. If you're interested in more of the podcast, you can find it wherever podcasts are. And just look for Jurassic Park Cast, include those hyphens, or Jurassic Park Podcast. That might work too. And if you like the videos, you can like and subscribe and receive notifications when a new one is available. There's a lot more to come. Until next time.